Robert Brault once said, "Sometimes in tragedy we find our life's purpose. The eye sheds a tear to find its focus." I believe these words are particularly appropriate when speaking of Mark Klaas. In October 1993, Mark suffered an unspeakable tragedy. His 12-year-old daughter, Polly, was kidnapped at knife point from her mother's home during a slumber party. She was later assaulted and eventually strangled by her abductor, Richard Allen Davis. Polly's case was featured on 2020 and America's Most Wanted. Thousands helped search for her, but it was not until Davis's arrest that he led authorities to her body. 2 months after the nightmare began, Polly was laid to rest, and a mere 9 months later, an advocate for child safety emerged. In September 1994, Mark Klaas created the Klass Kids Foundation, and in doing so, dedicated himself to the singular mission of stopping crimes against children. Today, Mark is a nationally renowned advocate for children. He is the co-founder of Beyond Missing Incorporated, a public benefit corporation that provides America's law enforcement community with a free and secure website to easily and swiftly create and distribute missing child flyers on multiple electronic mediums. In addition to his duties with the Klass Kids Foundation and Beyond Missing Incorporated, Mark sits on the advisory board of the Center for Community Interest, Fight Crime, Invest in Kids, and the National Children's Advocacy Center. Finally, Mark is a regular contributor for CNN, Fox, and MSNBC on missing children and victims' rights. Mark is an unwavering advocate for children and an inspiration for us all. In the face of tragedy, Mark found his purpose and has remained focused on it ever since. Instead of being remembered for her untimely death, the name Polly Hannah Klaas is synonymous with hope. Hope that future generations of children are given a chance to prosper in a world where adults do not prey on children, and a hope that awareness and advocacy will ensure that America's children will be safe in the internet era. It is my high honor to welcome him here today. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Klaas.
Hey, Michael, is this on? Is this thing on? Must be a light or something? All right.
I think we just click you on over and we'll go back.
That's okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank the university for inviting me, and I'd especially like to thank Michael Kaplan, the director of this event, who has gone to extraordinary measures and devoted an awful lot of his time over the past several months towards making this happen. So I think if anybody deserves a round of applause here today, it's Michael. The internet has changed the rules. Back in the day, children had to beware of predators lurking in alleys, dark stairwells, in and around parks and schoolyards. Those concerns certainly still exist, but the internet has emboldened a new generation of cyber perverts who rely upon anonymity and subterfuge to engage their evil intention. By the mid-'80s, the production and distribution of child pornography in the United States had been nearly eradicated. Perpetrators were isolated and fearful. Production and distribution of child porn images was difficult and very expensive. Because of the internet, the production and distribution of child pornography has become easy and inexpensive. While the vast majority of people were marveling at the potential and benefits of the internet, a small subset of individuals were pursuing the dark side of cyberspace, networking with each other and empowering amoral behavior, reinvigorating the near-dormant child porn industry, and lurking behind false profiles as they attempted to lure, groom, and victimize our kids. The very predators who could not penetrate our deadbolts, alarm systems, guard dogs, or personal armories have found a back alley into our living rooms and into our kids' bedrooms under the camouflage of binary code and New World technology. The problem has become so alarming that an instant message stating that I am a 12-year-old boy home alone and I want to have sex with you is enough to launch and deliver a convoy of white and blue-collar pedophiles willing to risk everything to satisfy uncontrollable urges. The problem became so alarming that Congressman Mark Foley, the founder and chairman of the U.S. House of Representatives Missing and Exploited Children's Caucus, confidently engaged his own high-stakes internet lure for more than a decade under our very noses. The problem has become so alarming that while we basked in a false sense of security, our children's bedrooms became the predator's new playground. However, before we explore the mysteries of cyberspace, I wish to provide a little bit of historical perspective and to talk a little bit about the Klass Kids Foundation. Henry Berg founded the ASPCA in 1866. And he founded it because he was observing in the streets of New York City the widespread abuse of animals, particularly the horses that were drawing the I guess produce, drawing things around town. So at any rate, he then started creating laws, writing laws to protect animals from abuse. In 1874, his organization successfully argued in court that a severely abused little girl was subject to protection under laws that protected animals from abuse, because laws did not exist preventing child abuse and no agencies existed to advocate on her behalf. In 1875, Mr. Berg helped to create the New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. The other image you see there is the very first missing child poster. Charlie Ross was playing in his front yard with his brothers and sisters in Germantown, Pennsylvania on July 1st, 1874, when he was kidnapped. It was a media sensation of the time. This is the first missing child poster. It was put up by the Pinkerton Agency. There were 23, this was a kidnapping. It was unlike the child kidnappings today. It was not predatory in nature. It was a kidnapping for ransom. And despite more than 23 interactions between the kidnappers and little Charlie Ross's family, he was not recovered alive. In March 1st, 1932, the son of famed aviator Charles Lindbergh was kidnapped from a second-story bedroom in the home that he shared with his parents. Now, it's often said that if the children of the rich and powerful were taken, we would observe a sea change in activity. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. The Lindbergh kidnapping resulted in the Lindbergh Law, the Federal Kidnapping Act. That allowed the FBI to presume interstate transportation after 24 hours and to become engaged in kidnapping cases. Unfortunately, there are a lot of agencies that continue to exist in the United States that firmly believe that you still have to wait 24 hours to make a missing child report after the child has gone missing. That was the impact, really, of this particular piece of legislation. I'm really going through this very quickly because there's obviously much more to this. On July 27th, 1981, little Adam Walsh was abducted and murdered. His partial remains were located 2 weeks later. In fact, the case was only recently closed. The things that came out of that were the Missing Children's Assistance Act of 1984 and the establishment of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Adam's father, John Walsh, founded America's Most Wanted and is certainly one of the leading proponents of harsher sentences for those who abduct or otherwise harm children. October 1st, 1993 started out like any other day for my wife Violet and I. I remember it was sunny outside. I took the bus into San Francisco, went and had a good day at my job as a car rental franchisee in San Francisco's Fairmont Hotel, came home, and at 6:21 that evening I had a conversation with my daughter Polly. She was very excited about the fact that she was going to be having a slumber party with a couple of her girlfriends in the home that she shared with her mother Eve in Petaluma, California, which was 30 miles north of where Violet and I lived. She was a sweet little girl. She was a good student. She was a wonderful actress. She had a zest for life. She was overcoming her shyness. She was trying to overcome her fear of the darkness and her fear of the boogeyman. And she was beginning at 12 years old to realize the potential that she had as a viable individual in our society. And she was a beautiful girl. Now, if you're fortunate and you're beautiful, good things can happen to you. You can be discovered and you can go to Hollywood, or you can be on the cover of magazines. If you're beautiful and the wrong people pay attention to you, terrible, terrible things can happen. And in fact, that's what happened to Polly. At 10:30 on the evening of October 1st, 1993, Polly and the girls were having a slumber party. And as Polly was opening her door to get ready for bed at about 10:30 in the evening, a knife-wielding, bearded stranger was standing there. He told the girls if they made a sound, he would slit their throats. That managed to stifle the screams that were ready to emanate from their very throats at that moment. He then proceeded to tie up and bind and put pillowcases over the heads of Polly's girlfriends, and he stole her into the night. Her last words were, "Please don't harm my mother and sister." They happened to be asleep in the next bedroom at that time. We spent 65 days. It was just absolutely unbelievable. The next day, the next morning, after being up all night, we heard a report on the local news station that a little girl named Pollyanna Klass had been kidnapped. And Violet and I knew at that point that we had to make some changes. We had to call each member of our families individually and tell them what had happened to my daughter, our daughter, so that they wouldn't hear it on the news as we just had. It also demonstrated to us that this was not an abstract exercise, that this truly was real life. So we went up to Petaluma, and we stayed there for the next 65 days. What we found out ultimately was that a recidivist violent offender, some individual who had been sentenced to over 200 years in prison during his criminal history, had been released after spending only 8 years of a 16-year sentence for his second kidnap, and that within 3 months he had kidnapped, raped, and murdered our daughter. This individual now sits on San Quentin's death row. Unfortunately, I live like 5 minutes from San Quentin. I see it absolutely every day. It's just a constant reminder, but we try to put that behind us. The next year, as Michael had said, in September of '94, we founded the Klass Kids Foundation, and we did it on a shoestring. We had $2,000, and we had a mission to stop crimes against children. We wanted to give meaning to Polly's death by addressing neglected areas of concern. We wanted to create a legacy in her name that would be protective of children, hopefully for a long time to come. A few of the programs that the Klass Kids Foundation is involved in include our very successful Print-a-thon program. Since 1996, we have been fingerprinting and photographing children throughout the United States. For a long time, that program allowed us to fund the foundation. What we do is we find community-minded businesses that will underwrite the program. We'll go in with our computerized technology. In fact, the very technology I think that the Secret Service was desperate to use today because they introduced us to it. And we've fingerprinted and photographed over 1 million kids in the United States, all at no cost to parents. We believe that this is the kind of program that has given us opportunities to get into communities all over America, to talk to the communities in America, to discuss various ways that we can all work together to protect kids in America. We've created many lasting relationships, and we have many, many satisfied customers. We have one program that we've been doing for the last 14 years, in fact. It'll be 15 years this year in St. Louis, Missouri. And the kids that we were fingerprinting 15 years ago are now bringing their own kids in, and it's pretty cool to see. I'm going to retire when they start bringing their kids in. That's going to be the end for me.